I smiled warmly at Carlisle, returning the gesture and stepping forth. Please, just call me Maddie. I prepared to move one hand to shake his but was surprised. I was getting a lot of those recently, when instead, Carlisle pulled me into a gentle hug. I stiffened, unsure of what to do when my eyes widened as he started to speak. Thank you, he whispered fervently, in my ear. He pulled back, still keeping a light grip on my shoulders. You don't know how much I was looking forward to finally meeting you. To thank you for all you've done, he said, gratitude in every line of his perfect face. I haven't done much of anything, I protested, flushing slightly that I had become so flustered I actually stuttered. Nonsense, Esme refuted immediately, Carlisle passing me to her so she could hug me gently as well. Loving Jasper like you do would be enough reason to thank you, she said, as she pulled back to smile warmly at me. We'd been worried about Jasper and Edward being alone with the rest of us paired together, Carlisle started, wrapping his arm around Esme's shoulder as Jasper wrapped one around my waist, pulling me to his side when I was released from Esme's embrace. Especially Jasper. He'd been having such a hard time since he joined our coven, and with such a difficult past, we feared. He trailed off, not wanting to say more, and he didn't need to. They were afraid with the prominent scars, to vampires at least, a blatant symbol of his violent past for all of his kind to see, that he would never find someone. Obviously, they never expected him to find a partner in a human. I looked up softly at Jasper, placing my hand lightly on his chest as he returned the soft gaze and lifted his hand to meet mine, squeezing it gently. I understand, I whispered, my emotions all over the place as I thought on Jasper's past. Burdened with a seemingly endless existence of solitude thanks to the physical evidence of his past, unable to bear his nature thanks to his gift, and no Alice to have picked him up at his lowest. This Jasper must have much more mental fortitude and strength than his alternate self. But it was born from added years of quiet suffering and loneliness that the Cullens couldn't alleviate like Alice. No doubt did in canon. I knew it wasn't my fault, I couldn't be there for him, but I still felt guilty all the same for not being able to be there sooner. Why couldn't I have been born when Alice was and turned, no matter if it would have been painful, more so to even capture the attention of any vampire enough for them to turn me? I'm sure Jasper was forced to suffer through worse for longer. Yes, I believe you do, Carlisle murmured in reply, and I managed to drag my eyes away from Jasper to look back to his father and see that understanding, knowing smile on his face. You must be something quite special if even Rosia warmed up to you. Rosalie only scowled and crossed her arms as Emmett laughed. We're just so glad Jasper found you, Maddie. He's been so much happier. It's like he's a new man, Esme added, and she looked so emotional. I'm sure if she was still human, she would have at the least been tearing up. Esme, Jasper murmured, looking a bit emotional himself, no doubt feeling his adoptive mother's love and affection for him. I just wanted you to know that you became a part of this family as soon as you chose to accept and love Jasper the way you do, even if we didn't know it yet, she smiled, pulling away from Carlisle to give me another, closer hug. Much to my amazement, I felt myself starting to tear up, getting caught up in their unexpected open acceptance of me into their family. Thank you. It means a lot to hear you say that, I managed to say. And it did. I didn't think it would. But hearing it now, it really, really did. Jasper smiled and kissed my temple as I was returned to him. Well, I'd love to spend some time talking to you about your gift, but it seems that Jasper plans on monopolizing you today, Carlisle said, amused as Jasper pressed me closer to him, his arm tightening a bit around my waist. That's all right. We have plenty of time in the future. You two can go ahead and enjoy some time alone together. Actually, I interrupted, hesitating as I stopped them from all leaving to do their own thing. There's something I've been meaning to tell Jasper for a while that might be better for you all to know, since it technically involves your treaty with the La Push Pack. I started, unsure as I stepped out of Jasper's arm to prepare my announcement. The treaty? Is it something serious? Esme asked in worry. Well, I'm not sure it... Oh, for goodness sake, Rosie interrupted. One of those filthy wolves named Paul has been trying to force his way into Maddie's pants since they met at 14. That's what she's trying to say, she said, tactlessly dropping the Paul bomb on them. I didn't even have time to snap my head to the blonde, horrified, when I flinched badly at a small cracking boom followed by feral snarling. My eyes finally settled on the strange sight of Emmett and Rosalie, holding back a struggling, very furious and feral-looking Jasper attempting to run out the door and Carlisle trying to calm him down, his words imperceptible to me as he spoke too fast for me to understand. I didn't have time to contemplate their sudden actions and me at my side, half hugging me and rubbing my arm in comfort, my whole form shaking slightly from shock. When I was suddenly hit with a dizzying kaleidoscope of visions, I couldn't even manage to gasp properly, choking and coughing on my breath as I struggled to control my lungs as visions passed before my eyes too fast for me to fully see. But there were some scenes that stood out and occasionally repeated, Jasper attacking and easily maiming and killing an unaware Paul before his companions could even react, followed by migraine-inducing flashes of blank or murky visions of what I could only assume was the ensuing fight. The rest of the Cullens following shortly concerned for him, more of those infuriating blanks than fire. The dear gods, no, there was fire. Funerals, mass funerals in La Push, and no. A funeral service at the Cullens' house. Where are they? Why can't I see who's there? Who was it? Not Jasper. Please not Jasper. Maddie, can you hear me? Sweetie, I need you to breath. Just copy Jasper's breathing. Can you feel it? Carlisle's soothing voice reached me as if from far away, slightly echoing. Sweetie? Never thought I'd hear Carlisle say that. Wait, Jasper? I thought he was going all frothy rage. It was then that I finally registered my back pressing against a cold and hard chest. And Jasper? I asked, my vision swimming as futures kept changing constantly, making my brain throb painfully in protest. I had only just realized that I was hyperventilating and repeating no, like a crazy person. Right, okay, having a bit of a breakdown. That's right, I'm here, come back to me, darlin', he murmured soothingly in my ear, though I could hear the undertones of fear and worry. Don't, I choked and coughed, unable to take in the necessary breath to speak. Breath, Maddie. Deep breaths followed Jasper's example. Carlisle instructed gently but firmly. But it was hard to focus on his even breathing with Jasper still planning to kill Paul, causing the painful influx of visions. Please, Jazz, don't kill him. Don't break the treaty, please, I urged desperately. It's not worth it, I choked out a sob, struggling hard not to cry, as it would only make it harder to regain control of my erratic breathing. Don't say you're not worth it, Jasper whispered, pained. You're worth more than I can ever offer. I shook my head fervently. Just please promise me you won't kill him or break the treaty, I urged. Promise me, Jasper, I pushed when I saw his hesitation between my shifting visions. He gave a defeated sigh and slumped a little over my small form, tightening his loose hold on me. I promise, damn it, I don't want to, but I promise, he finally said, and just like that, the intolerable influx of visions suddenly just stopped. My sight was dotted with spots as they finally were able to focus on my immediate surroundings. I gasped in a sharp, long breath and collapsed further into Jasper's arms, finally able to focus on steadying my breathing by following Jasper's example. What did you see? Rosie asked quietly after the family watched me regain regular breathing under tense silence. Rosier gasped in shock at the seemingly insensitive question, her tone both horrified and reprimanding. So many visions, I croaked in answer. Too many. I shook my head, pushing the scenes, clamoring my thoughts aside, and focused. I couldn't keep up with them all, but there were a few scenes, images, that I was able to catch. Jasper breaking the treaty and killing Paul, and then so much white and blurs because I can't see those stupid wolves when they shift, I growled in frustration and desperation. And then you followed him, worried about him, and more of those horrible blanks. I couldn't see the fight, and I needed to, I cried, my breath picking up before I felt a soothing wave of comfort and calm hit me. It helped a bit, but I was still shaking like a leaf. And then the fire I heard when they all collectively stopped breathing. That horrible fire burning and all that smoke. And then the funerals at La Push, and then there was a closed coffin here. I choked. And no one was here. I couldn't find any of you, and I don't know. I couldn't see. Shh, darlin', it ain't gonna happen anymore. Remember? I promised you I wouldn't, and I won't, Jasper cooed, rubbing my back as I turned around and buried my head in his neck, not caring that I was clinging to him in front of his family. I'm sorry, Rosia whispered, her tone surprisingly remorseful. If I hadn't gotten angry and blurted it out like that, I would have had the visions regardless of how I told him. I brushed off, recovering myself quickly as I forcefully assured myself of the fact that the future I saw was no longer possible. I wouldn't have been all here enough to try and calm him down myself. My lips quirked slightly as I shakily shifted to sitting on Jasper's lap, noting that we were seated on their couch. It's just as well that I had a panic attack because of the visions. I doubt anything could have stopped Jasper more effectively than when my safety or health is in danger. The tense atmosphere was finally broken when Emmett laughed at my comment. Jasper only let out a groan and dropped his head to my shoulder. "It ain't a laughin' matter, darlin'. I thought my dead heart was gonna leap out my throat," he muttered in barely restrained relief. Emmett only laughed more at the response. "Careful, brother, your south is showing," Emmett teased good-naturedly. Jasper only raised the bird to him. "Clear out if you have a problem with it," he scowled, only making Emmett laugh harder. The interchange drew smiles from everyone, and I finally calmed enough that I was no longer shaking like a stupid chihuahua. How embarrassing. I was extremely grateful when the Cullens did a wonderful job of pretending my little episode never happened and all moved to do their own thing. But stayed in the area, Emmett playing video games on the couch, Esme curled up with a book on a sofa, Rosia with a fashion magazine, and Carlisle had invited me to a friendly game of chess. Jasper the only one showing outward signs of concern by hovering. Not that I minded. I didn't exactly want to be alone with my thoughts at the moment. "Are you sure you want to play me, Carlisle?" I asked. He and Asmi told me to address them by their first name. Centuries-old vampire or not, I kind of have a built-in cheat, I warned, having learned to play chess as soon as possible, since it was kind of a staple in Twilight. Carlisle only chuckled, as does Edward, but that doesn't stop us from playing him either. Emmett especially likes to challenge him constantly despite knowing the most likely outcome. "Oh, hey, I'll beat that cheat one of these days," Emmett growled playfully from the couch, making me laugh since I knew I was a stubborn loser like he was. "Well, all right then. Forgive me ahead of time if I'm a little slow to make moves," I smiled. "I'm kind of using that time to cheat with my visions," I added mentally, "but I'd honestly rather cheat than lose a humiliating defeat to an age-old vampire. Hey, I never claimed to be anything near a saint, and I very much hated losing." The game took much longer than an online one did with a human or computer opponent. Carlisle intentionally changing his moves constantly and at inhuman speeds in his head before he makes them, making visions flash by too fast for me to see before he finally chooses a move and plays it. I also spent a lot of time looking at the board and choosing a move that would be better, but also looking ahead to the endgame to see if it would lead me to winning, depending on his and my future moves. Understandably, the first few moves I did, I more often than not lost at the end, but the more I changed my moves to my best advantage, the more often I started to win in my visions and the longer Carlisle took to make a move. I barely registered when the rest of the Cullens had actually migrated to watch our game in Fascination 2 absorbed in the match. Honestly, it was taking a lot of concentration for me to sort through visions. His moves brought me then my own, and Carlisle had to prove how effortless it was for him by also making small talk during the match, asking me questions on my gift, what triggered it, its limitations, theories on why those limitations exist, the possible further growth of my gift when human and how that growth could be triggered, etc., etc. It made me feel rather smart to be able to actually answer well and provide sound theories, though I knew it was because I had spent far too much time reading into and analyzing stories so I could write fan fiction in my previous life. But hey, if it's useful, who am I to complain? I did, however, take the opportunity of idle chatter to bring up something of relative importance. "You guys like to play sports, yeah?" I asked casually as I moved a piece. "Yes, we do, though we don't get much opportunity to," Carlisle answered easily, a slight question in his voice as he looked at me curiously. "And baseball is your favorite, yes," I stated more than asked, but still wanting confirmation. "Hell yeah," was Emmett's enthusiastic reply, being the one to answer me instead. "America's favorite pastime?" He grinned. "Well, if you're all free tomorrow, you'll get a chance to play a game, since there'll be a storm. Very loud, but no rain," I informed cheerily before skimming through visions after Carlisle made his move. "Sweet. You hear that, Jasper? You're seriously going down tomorrow." Emmett growled enthusiastically, obviously very pleased with the news. Carlisle, who also seemed very happy with the news, was much calmer about it and asked for as many details, and I happily provided as accurate a time as possible, and a description of the clearing they used after I looked for it in my visions. Then finally, after what seemed a small eternity, the match was decided. "Checkmate," I said tiredly, but satisfied. Probably not the best idea to stretch my vision muscles after the onslaught I'd suffered earlier, but I wasn't about to give up my only advantage. I haven't had such a challenging game in a while. Edward doesn't like to play often, despite his love of the game, because his gift doesn't let us provide much of a challenge. Carlisle smiled, looking well pleased as he examined the finished game. "Glad I could be of service," I smiled, giving a sweeping bow from where I sat. "About time. Now that you're done with that old man's game, you can play some real ones with me," Emmett grinned, pointing his thumb over his shoulder in gesture to the TV. Old man's Carlisle reeled back, looking jokingly affronted. "Why, I never," he breathed, though the whole image was ruined by the small smile that tugged at his lips. Emmett only waved his hands dismissively. Yeah, come on, little sis, let's see how good you are at racing," he said, laughing when I laughed in surprise at being easily lifted up and carried to the couch, with his one arm wrapped around my waist, like a girl carrying a doll. Let's not tell him that, though. Well, I couldn't say I was surprised to be playing Need for Speed Underground, and it was honestly frustrating to lose to Emmett, always being just seconds behind him in the races. My visions and previous experience playing video games, no use against those damn vampire reflexes. It was still fun, though, and Jasper seemed to like the frustrated pout that resulted from my no-win streak. Rosie pulled me away with an eye roll to look through fashion magazines and critique them after my 12th consecutive loss, only for the both of us to be pulled into the kitchen by an enthusiastic Esma to make chocolate madeleines when my stomach gave the barest of rumbles around noon, one I barely even heard. Apparently she'd paid close attention to Jasper about my tastes and appetite and had bought quite a few baking ingredients for sweet snacks. By the time we were putting the madeleines in the oven, all three of us were laughing and chatting amiably about stereotypical things like boys and clothes, the laughing coming from Jasper's growls that came from the living room whenever I told my experiences with teenage boys who were far too forward with me and didn't get a hint, or with older teens that were very sweet and thoughtful. By the time we returned to the living room, and I was sitting on Jasper's lap on the couch, nibbling on madeleines and passively watching TV with everyone, I realized that I had spent at least some amount of time with each member of the family. Well, except Edward, but I wasn't about to lament that loss. Everyone seemed to casually drift off to do their own thing again, as I ate through the madeleines, Carlisle and Esme heading to their studies, Rosierli going back to reading through magazines, and Emmett going back to playing video games, as soon as Jasper and I moved off the couch to return my empty plate to the kitchen. I giggled when Jasper moved to hug me from behind as soon as I started to wash the plate myself, feeling his smile in my neck as he hummed contentedly like a large feline. "You didn't have to wash it, you realize?" Jasper questioned. I scoffed as I finished washing it and turned off the sink, shaking it of the excess water. "It's one plate, Jazz. It'd be kind of rude to just leave a single measly plate in the sink. It'd ruin the wonderful image of Esme's perfect kitchen if there was this one dirty plate in the sink," I explained passionately as I dried it off with a towel and replaced it on the rack I saw Esme get it from, smiling when Jasper chuckled. "Well, now that you're done, mind if I take you where I've wanted to since you got here?" he asked. I turned in his arms and twined my hands in his. "Lead the way, Major Whitlock," I replied in mock seriousness, making him give that rakish smile that made my knees go weak. Oh gods, I wonder if I'll survive complete privacy with Jasper. The run to our destination was honestly the most fun I'd experienced in a long while. Way better than the roller coasters at Disneyland or Six Flags, and Jasper made it a point to send me his pleased feelings at my enthusiasm when I had actually started to breathlessly laugh aloud into his shoulder where I had tucked my head. Gods, how on earth did Bella find this terrifying? Oh, right. It stemmed from the fact that she couldn't even walk on a flat surface without hurting herself. Roller coasters might as well be called death traps in her vocabulary. Well, her loss, at least until she became a vampire herself. So, where are we going? I finally allowed myself to ask when he slowed to a human walking pace and shifted me from his back into his arms, still not letting me down. Edward ain't the only one with his own private sanctuary, Jasper replied, gently putting me down and walking ahead to move aside some tall shrubbery and reveal a little slice of freaking Eden. I heard my own sharp intake of breath in the silence of the forest as I stepped forward into the clearing and took in the sight. There was an absolutely breathtaking, picturesque scenery before me. It's what people imagined when they tried to picture where mythical creatures like fairies and unicorns hung out. The clearing was mostly flat and covered in vibrant green moss and soft ankle-high grass with the occasional random smatterings of pretty clumps of wildflowers. Off to the left side, curving along the edge of the clearing, was a shallow forest brook, burbling pleasantly and chorusing with the short, small waterfall it originated from. The forestry stopping to frame a short, scraggly cliff face that was eaten into by a breathtaking willow tree, with vibrant yellow moss growing atop the verdant foliage and making it seem like yellow flowers in bloom. Moss-covered stones of varying sizes were also interspersed around the clearing, 3 flat stones in a triangular position, and connected by 2 equally moss-covered naturally fallen tree trunks that looked like benches placed by nature itself. There was a lot of moss, as expected of forks, really. Jasper, there aren't words adequate enough to describe how incredible this is. I breathed in awe, understandably overwhelmed by the incredible beauty of it all. I might have cheated a little, he admitted. I laid the groundwork for most of it the first time we moved here and finished it up when we came back this time. He gently led me by the hand to the base of the large willow tree, moving aside the curtain of foliage to expose the thick trunk and the bed nest of blankets and pillows at its base and among its roots. This is amazing, Jazz, I couldn't help whispering as I took his gestured invitation to sit in the welcoming nest after he had let the natural curtain of the willow close us into our own little world. I'd hoped you might like it, he said with that toe-curling rakish grin as he sat down beside me, wrapping an arm around my waist as I laid back and leaned my head on his shoulder. Let's just say I'm glad you're an empath, otherwise my inability to verbally express my wonder and gratitude may have had you wondering if I hated it or was mentally impaired, I mused. I'd never think you were mentally impaired. Besides, I've never actually witnessed you at a true loss for words since you always seem to have a response for anything, he teased. Is that so? I drawled casually, making him chuckle. Exactly, he said dryly, chuckling as I only snuggled into him further, a small smile curving my lips. I'm sure if I had the ability to, I would have been purring by now, as I rest contentedly against him, enjoying the soft sounds of the forest, the natural symphony soon added to by the low, smooth baritone of Jasper's voice, when he asked me a question. What was it like living with your mother in Phoenix? He asked softly. It took me a while to register the question through the pleasant, drifting haze that had settled in my mind, but I got it eventually. Man. Well, I can't say Renee wasn't a loving mother because she was. She likes to dote on us and loves to cuddle us far too much, even now, and she spoils us with presents like sweets and clothes whenever she can, but she does have her flaws as a person that certainly became a part of the reason Bella and I are the way we are today. Renee, while she was loving and supportive and didn't leave us wanting for anything, she wasn't exactly very reliable when it came to matters not pertaining to emotions, like showing up at parent-teacher meetings, signing off on permission slips, getting project materials we needed, carpools, organizing parties, daily household chores, etc., etc. Thanks to that, Bella and I learned to be self-sufficient from a very young age, learning to cook and clean, learning to manage our time wisely, to take into our own hands the duty of making sure things are signed or bought. We even learned how to balance a checkbook before we even got into high school. She sounds... Jasper trailed off, unsure what to say. Airheaded, scatterbrained, flaky, I offered him dryly, amused. Jasper only nodded hesitantly. She is, but as bad as she can be with things like school and chores, her spontaneity and love of life seemed to more than make up for it at times. She took us to fun places all the time, like amusement parks, fairs, carnivals, flea markets, and shopping centers, and constantly surprised us by signing us up for things like arts and crafts, dancing, acting, singing, and martial arts lessons, whatever had caught her interest at the time. They didn't last very long because she lost interest and/or Bella ended up hurting herself or someone else. But Renee was happy when I showed an interest in some of the classes and asked to keep attending for longer, at least until Bella put her foot down and reminded us that extra lessons for anything were not in the budget. Sounds like you had an interesting childhood, he smiled, his thumb tracing calming circles on my hip. It was really fun, but I'm afraid it's the reason that Bella's so self-isolating. Thanks to her natural clumsiness and Renee's constant need to go out and have fun, things that should be correlated with fun, like parties and dancing and learning to do more hands-on things, equals disaster, waiting to happen and misery. Bella has always been a solemn, serious girl, even when she was a brat, so when kids laughed at her clumsiness, even if it wasn't meant to be mean or teasing, she took it personally and was hurt, so she started pulling away from others and focused on her studies. As she grew, she realized that thanks to Renee and her own developed inclination to be focused and prepared, that she was too mature and disconnected from her own age group and gender to get along with her peers, and too uncertain and socially awkward to get along with real adults, as Renee acts more like a child in an adult's body, anything. Of course, she did get some unpleasant habits from Renee, more than she probably realizes, and with less restraint since she's not as social, like her curiosity, which is honestly more trouble than not, her inclination to think of only her feelings and opinions on things like her well-being, and deciding things on her own in relation to important matters and discussions, all without even realizing that she's doing something wrong. "Mun," he hummed thoughtfully, his hand raising to softly pet at my hair. "And you? How did this all shape you?" I was quiet as I thought through my answer thoroughly before speaking, placing a hand over the one he had on my hip, mindlessly stroking the back of it with my fingers. "I think," I started slowly, "that my gift, my visions, played a great role in shaping me to be who I am today." I finished softly. I'd always been more mature than others my age. Like Bella, it came with being raised by Renee, but my visions provided me with experiences that, I suppose, aged me beyond my years. Thanks to my gift, I was able to see the consequences of all my actions, of Bella's actions, of Renee's, and being who I am rather than give up on what I want. If those consequences were negative, I instead started to find ways to manipulate the end result to get what I wanted anyway. I'm not saying it's the wisest or most noble thing, far from it, but I kind of realized from a young age that people generally tend to act on their own desires, whether for their own benefit, the benefit of a cause they believe in, or the benefit of their loved ones. They still act on them, so I saw no reason to hold back on my own when no one but me would take them into full consideration. I'm a selfish creature and see no reason to deny myself what I want, if I can have it without causing any harm. I sniffed, causing Jasper to chuckle at me. "Still sounds like you're a good person to me, only taking what you want as long as no one gets hurt," he commented, smiling into my neck as he brushed featherlight, ghosting kisses on my neck, allowing him more access by tilting my head back more comfortably onto his shoulder. "It's not like I do it out of the goodness of my heart," I muttered, mildly embarrassed at being called a good person, so used to referring to myself as understandably arrogant and selfish. "I just really don't do well with drama. Getting what I want is kind of spoiled if someone else isn't happy and throws a hissy fit. They bum me out and totally ruin my sense of satisfaction and victory," I pouted playfully. "Of course they did," he chuckled. "So growing up with Renee and Bella was a bit less stressful for you than for Bella?" he asked. "A bit, I suppose, but it was stressful in different ways. Well, exasperating is more like it. Most of the visions I've had in my childhood, honestly, mostly involved Bella getting hurt in some way, shape, or form, and spending extended periods of time with Renee can be exhausting for a natural introvert like Bella and I, though I am admittedly more outgoing than Bella, if only by comparison to each other, I confessed. "How were you more outgoing?" Jasper asked, curiosity lacing his tone. "Well, I actually enjoyed some of Renee's random outings for one. For another, I actually went to each and every school function, from in-school events like obstacle courses and awareness programs like Challenge Day to all the school dances we ever had." I answered, smiling at the fun memories I had accumulated. "Dances?" Jasper asked softly after a short pause. "Yeah, I even went to senior-only dances and proms that were held at nightclubs or hotel halls rather than the school gym because I went with older dates," I mused. "Dates," Jasper stated, flatly. "I heard you speaking about them with Rosie and Asmi in the kitchen. You had a different date for every dance, only ever going with them as friends, and then setting them up with other girls soon after," he repeated, trailing off a bit as his arms wrapped a bit more securely around my waist. "Yes, Jazz, I was quite aware you were listening, judging from all the growling you were doing." I snickered when another low, playful growl was his response. "And you still have most of their numbers," he more stated than questioned. But I answered him anyways, smiling at the hint of possessiveness in his voice. "Yeah, they like to ask me for relationship advice a lot, but some of them end up losing contact with me because it makes their girlfriends uneasy, which is understandable. I lifted my head a bit to nuzzle my cheek against his. They'd totally understand if I said I was deleting their numbers because I'm in a relationship now, I offered easily. It's not like I'm really vested in the tentative friendships I have with them. But you like them asking you for help and offering them advice. It's fine, Maddie. Just admit you like helping people, he teased. No, I said stubbornly. I refuse. My act was broken by a smile forcing its way to my mouth at Jasper's obvious amusement. I am curious about one thing, though, he started off casually. And what's that? I returned, interested. I know you went to dances with your dates as just friends, but what about other relationships? Any, exes? I laughed at that. Do you want to know their names so you can hunt them down? Another playful growl rumbled from his chest, and I let out a breathless giggle when he gently nipped at my ear. No, Jazz, no boyfriends. The closest I've gotten are those dates, and that only involved some hand-holding and innocent kisses. Kisses, Jasper repeated in a low, dark tone. On the cheek, I finished as if uninterrupted, my lips tilting up into an amused smirk that turned a bit vicious at my next words. Certain accidents have happened to anyone who's tried to get a bit too fresh with me. Oh? Jasper's interest was clear in his lighter tone. Accidents, you say? And you had absolutely nothing to do with it, I suppose, he said dryly, his bland look ruined by the amusement, clear in his amber eyes, and slight upwards quirk of his perfect lips. Why, I never, Jasper, I gasped in false innocence, dramatically affronted. How could you insinuate such a thing? Just because that one boy is still in the hospital after tragically tumbling down 3 flights of stairs. 3 flights? Jasper again repeated, this time incredulous. 3 flights of stairs doesn't mean I had anything to do with it. I finished promptly. It was just coincidence that he was in the exact place Bella was supposed to be in. Coincidence that Bella was nowhere in the vicinity, and coincidence that I happened to be near him when the unfortunate event occurred. Jasper only looked at me in silent awe and admiration. You're absolutely diabolical, he breathed in blatant respect. Thank you, I preened, chest puffing a bit at the praise. I love that about you, he purred, literally purred into my ear. I froze at the words immediately. You love me? I whispered in mild shock and disbelief. Sure, Jasper and I were openly affectionate with each other, and our feelings for each other weren't exactly in question by either of us. Thanks to our respective gifts, but we had never vocally spoken the label of our feelings for the other, and to hear it slip so casually from those tempting lips, to have it spoken like a caress to my skin, stole all the breath I had in me, my insides quivering madly like a frenzy of hyper butterflies. Yes, Jasper murmured back easily in reply. Very much so, he finished, his tone softer, sweeter than before, as he shifted so I was sitting sideways on his lap. I easily adjusted, my breath hitching at the reply and giving a cross between a huff and a breathless laugh as I wrapped my arms around his neck and hid my warmed face in his neck. So do you feel that, or do I have to say it? I whispered with barely any volume, embarrassed and overwhelmed with the intensity of the feelings his words had brought coursing through me, my body instinctively curling up in my subconscious attempt to hide myself. Oh, I can feel it, Jasper replied with just as much volume, pulling me closer to him. But it'd be nice to hear you say it, he murmured into my hair. None. My eyes squeezed shut as I buried my face further in the crook of his neck and struggled to keep my breathing more or less even. After a few ragged breaths, I let a shuddering sigh and sagged against him in defeat. I love you. The phrase spoken shakily, clumsily, strained, and with barely any sound, having taken much effort for me to say with such utter sincerity, exposing the raw emotion behind the words to him, had left my heart pounding wildly after they left my tongue, but at a weight I hadn't realized I even had before, lift up off my shoulders and a feeling of giddy lightness take its place. I'm sure I'll feel properly disgusted later at how sappy I was currently being. His gift and mine had acted as a safety net of sorts for me that allowed me to show Jasper my affection solely through my actions and playful words without concern of him eventually thinking that I didn't like him as much as he did me. Or that I didn't take our relationship seriously because of my lack of sincerely spoken, affectionate phrases. Obviously, Jasper was perfect for me. Jasper's own shuddering breath, coming out in a guttural half-moan, half-purr growl, pulled me back to the present as my recently declared love, at least verbally, suddenly easily shifted me so I was straddling him, chest to chest with no space between us as he pressed me tightly to his marble, Adonis body, wrapping me in a cool stone embrace. "Durlin, maybe I shouldn't say that aloud too often," he chuckled breathlessly. One hand gracefully sliding up from where he had gripped my thigh to slowly crawl up the side of my body. "'Cause hearing those words from you is almost too much for my heart to take." Nimble fingers teased the skin at the bunched hem of my short dress before moving over my clothed torso until he had ghosted over the swell of my breasts to rest his hand in the small space between my shoulder blades, the other hand sliding from my neck to its nape and up until his fingers were twined in my short hair and the back of my head cupped perfectly in his palm. I put up no resistance when he guided my lips to meet his, one of my own hands firmly tangled in his own hair and the other relishing in the feel of the rippling muscles I could feel in his shoulder from every small shift he made. "Man," a small sound escaped me as I arched my back into the feather-like patterns. His cool fingers drew on my spine, my desires growing more unrestrained, thanks to there being no immediate obstacles around, like there usually are. No Charlie or Bella in the other rooms, no possibility of students happening upon us in our cars, no vampire family to overhear anything intimate. We were, for once, well and truly alone together, as alone as we could be, have ever been, together. And didn't that just make my blood heat pleasantly under my skin? It seemed Jasper also picked up on it, as he gave a far more wild growl in comparison to the playful ones before. As the hand on my back slid back to my naked thigh, moving up to slip under my dress and cup my ass, his sudden squeeze making me gasp and surge my hips forward, only to meet his own and morph my gasp to a needy moan as his surprisingly cool, hard member met with my own tingling womanhood. Our kiss got more sloppy as I repeated the motion, rocking my hips and pressing down against his impressive length, relishing in the amazing contrast of our temperatures. The cold permeating through his clothes, making my heated snatch pulse and tingle as much as the deep-throated growl that my actions dragged from his lips as I sucked and nibbled at them. "Maddie," he choked, the hand from my neck disappearing, soon followed by the curious sound of bark snapping and crackling, muffled by the sound of tearing cloth as he slowly, painstakingly brought his hips up to match my pace. Gods, Jasper, fuck, the sound of him so easily destroying a thick tree root with one hand and groping my ass with the other turned me on way more than I expected. My hips snapping forward much faster than before in my excitement and making Jasper let out a long hiss through gritted teeth as his own hips snapped forth, much rougher than I think either of us expected. "Oh fuck, I think I like it rough." I nearly sobbed in confession as the hard thrust had me lose the little rhythm I had, opting for quick, harsh grinding in my attempts to get the same friction, my head lifting up to the tree's canopy, eyes squeezed shut in an attempt to stop them from popping out from two wide-open lids. Jasper only groaned. The sound followed by more crushed bark and torn fabric as he pressed a cool forehead on my heaving chest, his free hand moving to press against my swollen clit through damp panties, as he followed my harsh grinds with his own hard, fast thrusts, doing an excellent job of driving me to my peak too soon with that magical, practically vibrating thumb of his. "Fuck, Jasper," I cried with no volume, my thighs clamping at his waist, and my arms clamping so hard around his head, smothering his face in my chest, that I was sure I would most likely bruise. Not that I cared, I was still shuddering every so often, and riding the aftermath of my embarrassingly fast release. I sagged against him, my arms falling limp around his neck as I took deep breaths to calm my racing heart. "So much better than toys," I moaned in pleasure, still breathy and high from my first orgasm at the very talented hands of a male. He only gave a startled, short laugh of amusement. "I don't know how to feel about yaksaikusin like that in the heat of the moment," Jasper started, sounding strained as he shook his hand of wood splinters and bits of cotton to stroke at the slightly damp hair of my neck. "It does bad things to my self-control," he chuckled weakly, his other hand softly roaming the contours of my body through my dress, thumbing almost shyly at the swell of my breasts, feeling the outline of my lacy bra. "Well, I for one love your self-control," I sighed in pleased satisfaction, nuzzling against his neck as he chuckled with a little more volume than before, relishing his slow wandering hands. I knew he didn't have the luxury of touching me during our heated moment, realizing he was more likely to hurt me than pleasure me. It was a good thing I seemed to like it rough then, but it still meant he had to keep a tight lid on his actions, just a smidgen less. Gods, if this was just a small taste of the future, I couldn't wait to be a vampire. It's getting dark, darling. I should get you home, he murmured, kissing the crown of my head. I let out a petulant little murmur of complaint just before my traitorous stomach let out a near inaudible growl like it did earlier in the afternoon, making Jasper chuckle in amusement as he shifted me a bit further away from him in his lap, sitting up straighter and crossing his legs. See, you need to go home and eat dinner. Come on. The run back is going to be chilly. Damned amazing vampire senses, stupid necessary human functions, I muttered in irritation as I allowed Jasper to shift me and pick me up, bridal style in his arms, not even bothering to try getting up on my own. I doubt I could walk well right now anyway, with my legs feeling a bit too much like jelly at the moment. Jasper only shushed me and lifted my mood by giving me a soft kiss, or 2 or 3. Damn boyfriend who knew how to cheer me up so well. It was a relief to come home to an empty house, remembering that Charlie had gone out fishing and Bella still wasn't back from her little date with Edward. I gladly ate a quick dinner of a sandwich and a glass of milk in silence and took a relaxing bath while I waited for Jasper to drop his car off at home and come back with an overnight bag, since he saw no point in leaving me while I slept, just to go back for clothes if he could bring it with him now. Thinking that I was returning to the Cullen house so soon after my first visit was amusing, especially as it would be Bella's first visit. Hopefully she wouldn't have a hissy fit because of it like she did the fact that I knew about them being vampires before her. I smiled, not surprised when I saw Jasper already waiting in my room looking through my bookshelf, as I did take a long time in the bathroom, bathing, brushing my teeth, changing, etc. Bella's gonna be here soon, and Charlie soon after her. I reminded unnecessarily as I tossed the towel around my neck over the desk chair. I know, I can already hear Edward and your sister coming, he replied, cocking his head to the window as if listening, but not taking his eyes off of the book he chose. A treasury of classic poetry. I plopped down on my bed and curiously watched him flip through the pages, eyes reading through them quickly before he stopped on a particular page, early in the book, just standing there and staring at it. I was about to ask what was wrong, but he beat me to it, speaking first. Love, he whispered, immediately catching me by surprise. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. My breath caught in my throat as he turned, book still in hand and clearly recited from the page his eyes were glued to. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack, from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning, "Do you lack anything?" I breathed. Our gazes locked together as soon as he tore them away from the page. "A guest," he replied, "worthy to be here," love said. "You shall be he," I recited softly, feeling my eyes warm with emotion as he shut the book and silently, slowly walked closer. "The unkind, ungrateful, ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee," he muttered as he knelt in front of me, leaning over to rest his head on my chest. I smiled and twined one hand in his ridiculously soft hair, the other finding his hand and twining them together. "Who made the eyes but I?" I murmured back, staring into those deep pools of amber, as he reconnected our gazes. "Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. And know you not who bore the blame, my dear. Then I will serve. You must sit down," I continued, shifting my hand to his face, guiding it to lift to mine, "and taste my meat." I smiled softly into the chaste, short kiss we shared. "So I did sit and eat," Jasper finished reciting with a smile as he rested our foreheads together, our eyes closed as we took deep breaths, taking in the other's scent. "Leave it to you to recite one of my favorite poems in that book," I commented dryly, my voice low and soft from the weight of emotion the poem's words had carried, overwhelmed with its potency, as I usually am around Jasper. I admit that poetry ain't exactly my thing. That's more Carlisle and Edward. History's the subject I'm more comfortable with, he admitted as he pressed his face into my freshly washed hair. Still a bit damp from my bath, inhaling deeply, I only laughed shakily at his confession. "I think that's a good thing, because you reciting good poetry does crazy things to my emotions." I shuddered, feeling him smile against my cheek as he gently lowered me onto the bed, draping himself over me, but keeping most of his weight off of me. "Our siblings are back from their cute little date," Jasper announced after a comfortable lull in conversation. And right on cue, I heard the roaring of Bella's truck getting louder and louder as they approached home. "You smell amazing," I replied back, startling a laugh out of him, and making him pull up a little to look down at my amused face in incredulity. What you do? I laughed, getting a few more chuckles out of him as he resettled himself so his ear rested over my heartbeat, allowing me the access necessary to comb through his lovely hair with minimal effort. I guarantee that you smell better, he purred. Floral, similar to your sister, but still different like gladiolus eucalyptus and a hint of lemon, he murmured as his nose nuzzled against the hollow of my collarbone, inhaling deeply again. I'll just take your word for it then, I smiled, returning to my action of combing and stroking his hair. I swear it was just so nice. Then the serene mood was broken when I heard the door open, and Jasper snorted in disbelief. What is it? Edward just admitted to stalking her, and doesn't even sound ashamed or guilty about it. Jasper answered dryly, What else is there to do at night? I mocked offended Edward, making Jazz snicker a bit, but then I stiffened suddenly as I recalled something else. Wait, I don't talk when I sleep, do I? Or snore? Oh gods, please tell me I don't drool, I whispered the last in sheer horror. Is that why you stopped petting me? Jasper muttered a bit grumpily, pressing a bit closer to me, rubbing his cheek slightly on my chest. You don't do any of those things. You're one of the most average, boring sleepers I know. Hoy, I play growled, tugging at his hair lightly, even though I knew it didn't hurt him, obviously, but it's the thought that counts. Wait, that's probably not how that phrase is supposed to be used. Jasper's light chuckles pulled me out of my train of thought, his head nodding upward in a nudging motion to my still hand. I'm sure it's to make up for how extraordinary you are when awake, he amended easily, his eyes closing in contentment as I resumed combing my fingers through his hair, my insides warming and tingling at the easily given compliment. What are you? A cat-vampire hybrid? I mused before pausing. Wait, is it possible for an animal to become a vampire? Or maybe the venom would be too strong and kill them before it could happen. Wait, no, bad idea, Maddie, don't go mad, scientist. It's these kinds of thoughts that lead to things like Jurassic Park and the zombie apocalypse, except it'd be vampire hamsters. Maddie, Jasper interrupted, sounding highly amused. I murmured as my thoughts wandered. You're starting to ramble, he snickered again. Edward actually whispered vampire hamsters under his breath in disbelief in the middle of his conversation with your sister. I burst out laughing at that, picturing broody Edward all wide-eyed and muttering vampire hamsters of all things under his breath. I was still giggling when I heard Charlie come home. Someone knocking on my door as soon as they quiet down a bit. Come in, I invited easily but quietly, seeing as Jasper hadn't vanished and I only just heard Charlie come in. I assumed the soft knock on the door could only be Edward. As expected, he opened the door silently and gave me a far better expression of disbelief than I had imagined. Vampire hamsters? He questioned in half-horror at imagining such a thing and the person who thought of it in the first place, which only set me off laughing again. Jasper actually had to shift us, so we were laying on our sides, as I instinctively curled up, laughing as hard as I was. Am I interrupting something? Bella asked in mild concern, embarrassment, and envy as she eyed Jasper and I's tangled forms, completely unashamed of our closeness and not feeling like pulling apart to cater to their delicate sensibilities. I only grinned at my now nervous sister as she shifted hesitantly in the doorway, looking between Edward's strange expression and me. Not much. Jasper and I were just wanting to congratulate you two on joining the Slumber Party Club, I said cheerfully. The Slumber Party Club, Bella repeated slowly, bemused. Yeah. Hey, maybe now we could have a double sleepover as a foursome. My grin growing a fraction as Jasper lifted his head slightly to show me that his expression was one of distaste at the suggestion. His nose wrinkled in disgust at the thought, while Edward simply gaped at me in shock and horror. Bella, on the other hand, seemed to turn a glowing red at the idea, making me cackle a bit. Oh, Ed, I think it's a good thing you can't read innocent Bell's mind right now, otherwise I don't think you'd ever recover from the mental scarring. I had to bite my lip to keep from bursting out into more laughter as I actually made Edward speechless, his disbelieving gaze turning to his very red-faced love. Why, I told you to stop calling me that ridiculous nickname, Bella sputtered, opting to choose a different topic to broach than uselessly flail in the current one. Jasper's chuckling had Bella straighten and redden further, if that was possible, as she realized just who she was having an outburst in front of. I think maybe you two should head on to Bella's room now before Maddie gets you both more riled up. Seems like she's in a more playful mood than usual. Jasper warned teasingly. I am not. Those two are just too easy to mess with. I mean, vampire hamsters, foursome. Really? That's all it takes to unsettle them? I defended. We're still here, Edward grumbled a bit crankily, his tone obviously irritated. I only turned to him with a flat expression, one eyebrow raised, a skill I practiced and perfected years ago. Yes, and? I replied uncaringly. I only smirked triumphantly at his annoyed scowl, smirk turning to a grin as I turned to my beloved sister, when she only sighed in exasperation, knowing exactly how far up the wall I could drive someone. Why don't you kiddies go off to bed now? I'm sure you'll enjoy your alone time as much as Jasper and I do. Well, maybe not that much, but still, at least it's something. Good night, Maddie, Bella firmly interrupted me before I could keep going, rolling her eyes at my antics. Don't let the vampires bite, I replied cheerfully. Two dry, emotionless laughs were my only response as Bella trudged away, Edward following shortly after, only looking back at us to shake his head at me in disapproval. My completely mature response was to stick my tongue out and flip the bird to his retreating back, the action causing Jasper to chuckle. I allowed my softened gaze to return to him, my hand immediately finding itself once more buried in his hair. You know, I noticed you laugh a lot more than I expected. Not that it's a bad thing, of course. Your laugh, just like everything about you, really is gorgeous, I commented idly as I returned to petting him. I was a bit surprised about that too at first, he confessed. But I found that it's hard not to laugh, to not smile when I'm around you. You just make it so easy for me, darling. My hand tightened a bit in his hair, my other gripping the back of his shirt in restrained emotion, as I attempted to keep my breathing even from the squeal-worthy confession, unable to do anything about my quickened heartbeat and warming cheeks. Gods, Jasper, honey, if you want me to keep a normal heart rate around you, you have to at least tone down the heartfelt confessions. I breathed with barely any volume, further curling myself around him and happy when he returned the sentiment. By nuzzling his face in my chest, nose brushing against the soft material over the bare skin between my breasts. Nah, he brushed aside easily. I like it when ya get all flustered like this. You get so overwhelmed by your emotions, so happy, that you don't know what to do and react to it by wanting to curl up and hide. I think it's adorable. Makes me want to hold you and never let you go, he purred. Jasper, I half whined, half scolded as I hid my warm face in his hair, hugging him more securely to me and allowing me to feel the pleasant rumbling caused by his soft chuckle. Man, Jasper really knew how to get my heart racing. The damned gorgeous jerk. I sighed contentedly and snuggled further into the hard, cool, clothed chest I was using as a pillow, one solid marble arm around my waist, and a pleasant contrast to the stifling warmth underneath my layers of blankets and comforters. I know you're awake, kitten, Jasper whispered with a rumbling chuckle. The vibrations I felt through my body leaching to his making me shiver. Men, and as my lover you were supposed to pretend otherwise until I fully satisfied my desire to snuggle with you, I murmured sleepily, rubbing my cheek against him like a cat seeking attention. Jasper seemed to give his own feline reaction by sounding what could only be a purr of contentment, as he raised his hand to stroke my unruly hair back into some order, not that it was difficult, being as short and naturally well-mannered as it was. But as your lover, I thought I might want to know that your sister is gonna wake up soon, so if you want the bathroom to yourself, you should get up now. At that announcement, I sat straight up, scrambled out of my bed, grabbed the clothes in the closet I set aside for today, and all but flew to ye bathroom, ignoring Jasper's snickering at me all the while. I liked having privacy in the bathroom. Thank you very much. Of course it didn't exactly take me long, only taking a quick shower since I had taken a bath the night before, and then slipping on the black denim long dress I had hurriedly nabbed, drying my hair as I made my way back to my room, and consequently, Jasper. He seemed to enjoy watching silently as I clipped on a vampire tear choker, and sat across from him in the rocking chair to put on my red and black double-buckle heels. I smirked when he was right behind me as soon as I reached for my black and red riding hood coat, beating me to it and helping me put it on like a gentleman. Thank you, I murmured with a shy smile. Not quite used to chivalry. That's genuinely sincere, distracting myself with doing up the buttons of my coat. Anytime, Jasper replied easily, wrapping his arms around my waist. As soon as I was done, I took a deep breath as I relaxed back against him, letting my head rest in the crook of his neck, my heels putting me a bit closer to him in height, though not by much. both of us being at opposite ends of the spectrum in regards to height. "Did Edward already get his change of clothes from you?" I asked unnecessarily, when I heard muffled conversation come from my sister's room, signifying she was awake, already knowing the answer. "Of course!" Jasper's own voice was slightly muffled from where he had nuzzled his face into my hair. Apparently, it was one of his favorite things to do when we cuddled. I slid around in his arms until we were chest to chest, my own arms wrapping around to lay flat on his deliciously muscled back. "Your clothes are as fabulous as always," I commented idly, as I leaned back a little to eye him up and down, taking in the light gray turtleneck shirt he wore that was loose but still clung a bit to his god-like physique, faded black jeans with a few stylish tears here and there, and some badass, durable-looking black cowhide military boots. Overall, the outfit only made the package it wrapped all the more desirable, and I licked my lips before I could stop myself, nibbling on the lower half in an attempt to rein in my suddenly strong urges to simply jump him. Jasper himself gave a small groan, slumping his head against my shoulder, and very intentionally loosening his grip around my waist. "It was Rosie who did me the favor of packing the bag. I don't know if I want to thank her or curse her for it, though," he muttered. "Well, I for one am definitely thanking her," I said without shame as I pat his head in apology and comfort. "Sorry, hun, but you're just far too attractive for us mere mortals," I cooed. "Of course!" Then I was startled when Jasper burst out in surprised laughter, seeming to shock even himself a bit. Mind explaining that one?" "Your sister just pulled a joke out on Edward. It caught me by surprise," he coughed, disguising the last of his fading humor. Yes, the breakfast joke," I nodded sagely, a smile tugging at my lips despite no longer finding much humor in it myself after knowing about it for so long. "Speaking of breakfast," I trailed off, just in time for my stomach to finish for me and growl near inaudibly, as it usually does to notify me that I do indeed need to eat. "Well, you were planning on crashing their breakfast time anyways, weren't you?" I shrugged at that. "True," I said, tapping a black-tipped, well-manicured finger against my chin thoughtfully. "Well then, let's go interrupt their super awkward breakfast," I continued enthusiastically, putting one hand on my hip and the other pointing up like a superhero, only for the image to be ruined when I shrieked lightly before catching myself and clamping my mouth shut when Jasper suddenly scooped me up in his arms. "Onward, my handsome steed." My recovery time was quick as always, I thought as I readily wrapped my arms around his neck to steady myself as he casually glided down the stairs, conversation floating up to me and becoming clearer the closer we got. "Me hunt." I groaned when we walked in just in time to see Bella hunting for cereal, and then making it worse once she sat with her sad breakfast again. "Can I get you anything?" My attempts to hide my snort of amusement in Jasper's shoulder brought the distant couple's attention to us. "You might as well just shove your neck in his face if you want to offer him anything," I snickered as Jasper seamlessly set me down in front of the fridge as I spoke. "You two seem to have a more similar sense of humor than I expected," Edward said dryly, arms crossed from where he was the picture of casual, leaning against the counter as he was. I heard an additional or wanted at the end of that sentence. I sang as I opened the freezer to take out a box of waffles. Already opened, Jasper taking his place beside his brother, looking far more comfortable in comparison, and obviously the more attractive of the two. It really showcased that while Edward had a boyish charm, Jasper blew him out of the water with his more masculine, mature appearance. Belle can keep her brewy boy toy, I'll keep my confident hunk of a man. I smirked when Edward glowered at me, listening in on my thoughts. See if he can contradict me? I hummed cheerily as I took out a plate and a glass for milk after putting 2 waffles in the toaster. Bella looked between the brothers and I, unsure of how to act now. "Eat your cereal before it gets soggy, Bella, and just pretend Jazz and I aren't here," I said with a roll of my eyes after pouring milk in the glass. I stared between the chocolate and maple syrup in the fridge door, conflicted for only a second before choosing the chocolate and taking out the whipped cream can while I was at it. I shut the door with my foot and gave Bella a flat, pointed look when she still hadn't moved. Bella thawed and very intentionally ate a spoonful of her cereal. I nodded in approval before moving on, reaching my setup in time for the waffles to be done, Jasper moving behind me to watch my actions curiously. So, what's on the agenda for today?" Bella asked after swallowing her mouthful, taking my words to heart and seeming to surprise Edward because of it. "What, did he expect my sister to not listen to me?" I shrugged and focused on turning my waffles into a delicious masterpiece, taking a banana from the fruit bowl and putting thin slices on the hot waffles before smothering it all in chocolate syrup and whipped cream, quickly eating what was left of the banana and moving to the table to enjoy the delicacy at my leisure, Jasper ghosting behind me. "What would you say to meeting my family?" Edward replied casually, making Bella choke on the spoonful she just took. "Are you afraid now?" he continued hopefully. I only rolled my eyes as I chewed. "Yes," Bella admitted easily, seeing no point in lying. I watched their interactions carefully, taking in every little action, every inflection in their voices, gauging how well or how poorly they interacted with each other as a couple, and while I wasn't completely satisfied with it, there wasn't much to be dissatisfied with at so early a stage in their budding relationship. Damn it. Edward only sent me a sharp glower before immediately sending a charming smirk at Bella. "Don't worry, I'll protect you." "Bipolar much?" "I'm not afraid of them," Bella corrected. "I'm afraid they won't like me." "Won't they be, well, surprised that you would bring someone like me home to meet them? Do they know that I know about them?" I snickered at that. "Please, they knew about you from day one, with how much Eddie boy obsessed with you after catching a whiff of you." Bella flushed at that while Edward glowered at me. "And what do you mean, someone like you? A teenager? Human? Female?" I teased, turning Edward's glowered into a full-on glare and matching scowl when Jasper snickered. "Kinda hard to keep secrets in our family with a mind reader," Jasper drawled flatly, sending Edward a look that the boy only shrugged at. "And you making everyone feel all warm and fuzzy about spilling their guts, don't forget that," Bella retorted lightly. "Oh, I'm sure he can use more than warm and fuzzies to spill much more than just their guts," I added darkly after finishing up my breakfast, drinking the last of my milk. "You paid attention," Edward smiled approvingly at my sister, ignoring my comment altogether, which in turn made me roll my eyes as I moved my dishes to the sink. "I think you should introduce me to your father," he said rather abruptly, probably following one of his strange trains of thought. "He already knows you," Bella reminded, though it did remind me that I should probably introduce Jasper to Charlie as well. At least I don't spring it on him like Bella will, considering I already told him I was dating Jazz, so he's already gotten used to the idea and trusts my judgment. "As your boyfriend, I mean," Sparkly Boy clarified helpfully. Bella only gave him a look of suspicion in return as Jasper and I settled back to watch the show, sitting across from them at the table with me on Jasper's lap. "Why?" she questioned. Jazz and I's gaze turned back to Edward. "Isn't that customary?" he asked innocently. And back to Bella. "I don't know," she admitted, and she really didn't with her non-existent dating history, but you'd think she'd learn from pop culture things like television and movies. Then again, she wasn't much of a couch potato or a moviegoer, and the most recent example she had was freaking Jane Austen books. Well, it does certainly fit into Edward's era, more than the current one. Old souls indeed. Really, they deserved each other. That's not necessary, you know. I don't expect you to, you don't have to pretend for me. I sucked in a near inaudible breath of disbelief from that, biting my cheek to keep from replying. "Sister, please." I can totes imagine Edward resorting to seduce, dazzling you into dating him, while Edward's smile towards Bella was patient. I could tell it was slightly strained, most likely because of my thoughts, and Jasper's silent chuckling. "I'm not pretending," he assured. Bella looked down at the soggy remnants of the sad meal she called her breakfast. Insecure, my own grip on Jasper's arms around my waist tightened in my attempt not to snap at the two impatiently. Edward for his stupid beating around the neon pink fucking bush, and Bella for her pointless insecurities. "Are you going to tell Charlie I'm your boyfriend or not?" Edward demanded, apparently pushed by my thoughts. "Is that what you are?" Bella asked weakly, looking stressed and hiding a grimace. No doubt because of the thought of Charlie's reaction. I only rolled my eyes at that. Like always, she was excessively overreacting and making a bigger deal out than it really was. It's a loose interpretation of the word boy, I'll admit. I openly scoffed at that, casually glancing at my nails when he shot me a glare at my unwelcome interruption. But Bella didn't like I wasn't even there. Just like I'd told her to. We didn't exactly have my issues keeping such thing from each other, as she was likely to confess to me more in depth on the conversation in private, and at least this way I could analyze Edward's reactions and expressions for her, and report them to her later. "I was under the impression that you were something more, actually," she confessed shyly. looking down at the table as if she didn't just send Edward's undead heart fluttering if Jasper's straightening slightly and eyeing his brother strangely was any indication. Though he did an excellent job of keeping the emotion from his face, his eyes all but swirled with it. "Well, I don't know if we need to give him all the gory details," he replied. "Yeah, I doubt Dad would like it much if I called Jazz my lover in front of him," I piped in finally, making Bella's eyes snap to me in surprise. "Lularoz?" she squeaked, face becoming progressively more red by the second. "Well, boy hardly fits someone like Jasper," I drawled. "He is a real man not needing to be said. And the whole boyfriend-girlfriend thing sounds disgustingly juvenile regardless," I continued blandly. "Do you two mind?" Edward whispered slowly, finally snapping at having a peanut gallery criticizing his every move. I raised my hands in mock surrender. "Fine. Sorry, I have some business to attend to upstairs anyways," I said, excusing myself, standing up from Jasper's surprisingly comfortable lap. I should probably take my bag to the car," Jasper said, excusing himself as well, clearing his throat to hide an amused smile, as the two of us made our escape from the irate, broody vampire. Of course, by the car, he meant my car, since that's what we were taking to his house. I shook my head of stray thoughts as I made my way upstairs to Bella's room, Jasper wordlessly splitting off to my room when we reached the top of the stairs to do his own little task at a more human speed. Neither of us were in much of a rush to leave, but we didn't want to linger with the awkward couple either. Not now that we've gotten all the fun we could out of them. I sighed and simply moved to Bella's closet, looking through her clothes to pick out the outfit I knew she would choose eventually, but also wandering back to my room to bring her back a matching bracelet and necklace set of the more modest, normal designs in my collection. Bella walked in as soon as I was done setting her outfit on her bed, shoes at the foot of it. "Thank goodness," Bella sighed in relief upon seeing the neatly displayed clothes. "Maddie, you're a lifesaver," she easily praised, giving me a hug of sincere gratitude. "I know," I replied smugly, though I hugged her back warmly before letting her go so she could inspect her outfit more closely. "Now that that's done, Jasper and I will be going ahead." "Ahead?" Bella repeated in confusion, looking up from the blue blouse she had picked up. "Yeah, Jasper and I are headed to the same place as you, after all," I replied casually. "What?" was the only thing she managed in shock. "Oh, don't worry about it, though. Jazz already took me to do the whole meet and greet with his parents yesterday, so we'll probably be elsewhere before you even get there, and have the rest of the Cullen family all to yourself." "Lucky you." I winked and waved a lazy hand back as I reached the doorway, smirking at her shocked expression. "Good luck." In my attempts to curb the small amount of jealousy I saw budding in Bella's eyes when I left, I only greeted the Cullens quickly before Jasper complied with my wishes to give Bella her time with his family alone, and whisked me off again to his sanctuary, though not before I gave both Carlisle and Esme small thank you gifts for hosting me yesterday, and also a small apology for coming over again so soon and not staying for very long. I started with giving Esme a crystal vase filled with pink roses, surrounded by other roses of a deeper pink color and a few red roses here and there. I had found the vase at an antique shop but could never really bring myself to use it or give it away until now. Jasper was the one who helped me by setting it up and taking it to the car while I was busy with Bella back home. "Oh, this is lovely, Maddie, thank you. But you didn't have to," Esme choked out, one hand accepting the vase and the other gracefully covering her mouth to show she was a bit overwhelmed. "Nonsense," I denied. "Of course I had to. A thank you for being such a wonderful hostess yesterday, and an advanced apology for coming again so soon and not even sticking around for much this time." I finished somewhat sheepishly. "You don't have to worry about that, dear," Esme assured. "Jasper's told me about how much you love your sister and some of your concerns regarding her," she said with motherly affection. I only sent a raised brow at Jasper, who was innocently looking away. "I understand why you want to make yourself scarce today, and think it's very mature of you to give your sister this opportunity to grow into herself, small as it may be." This and the talk we had yesterday made me understand just why our children thought we would get along so well. Carlisle mused aloud when Esme had excused herself to put the vase somewhere in the house where it would look best. "Oh, that reminds me. Jasper, hand it over." He dutifully gave me the small, wrapped package, which I promptly handed to the now curious sire of the coven. "I got you something, too," I said cheerfully, shuffling nervously when he unwrapped the gift to reveal a clear beaker mug with amusing forms of measurement like half a human brain and enough plutonium to make a bomb. I know you don't drink coffee or anything, but I thought it'd be fun for you to use it as a pen and pencil holder at work. I love it, thank you. I'm sure Esme and the others will get a kick out of it when they see it. Carlisle said brightly, dazzling me for a bit with his warm smile. It made me recall for a moment that Carlisle was my second favorite male in the book. Maddie, you in there? Jasper's inquiry brought me back to the present, where I was currently snuggled in his lap under the willow tree. Yeah, just thinking about your hot dad, I reply honestly. Jasper only gave me a dry look and sent a punishing nip to my earlobe. Watch it, Maddie, he warned in a low tone that gave me a shiver. I only smiled and nuzzled at his neck. You should know by now that there's no competition, Jazz, I assured easily. Maybe not, but that mud at the reserves can be a threat to you and I can't do anything about it because of that damned treaty. Jasper's loose grip on my hips tightened, ever so slightly, and I could actually feel him giving me a taste of his upset and anger with his gift. Whether it was intentional or not, I didn't know, nor did I particularly care, to be honest. It only made me love him all the more that he was comfortable literally sharing his emotions with me, subconsciously or not. While I very much love that you're willing to so readily take care of it for me, treaty or no treaty, this was my problem long before I met you, and I had been handling it fine until it got hopped up on canine steroids. I sighed despondently at that, reminiscing on the days when a knee to the crotch and a fist to his throat actually hurt the ass himself rather than me. Besides, it's not exactly like you're having to lock me away to keep me from dashing over to their territory. And when your sister starts to spend her time there after we publicly leave, Jasper questioned, voicing a worry I have no doubt has been on his mind for a while. Then what, Maddie? He pushed. I know you already, Madeline. And while you're perfectly capable of being sensible and listening to your self-preservation instincts, those things tend to fly out the window as soon as Isabella Marie comes into the picture. And how would you know that? I challenged defensively. The car accident, he replied flatly, instantly, making me deflate just as fast. Okay, you may have a point, I conceded softly, unable to muster up much of my humor into my voice like I usually do. Jasper lifted my head up with gentle fingers, moving to cup and caress my cheek when our eyes met. His a soft melted topaz. There's nothing wrong with loving your sister so much, darling. That devotion to your family is one of the things I love most about Ye. But it worries me to no end that you're willing to put them before yourself, that you're so ready to sacrifice anything and everything for him. He pressed our foreheads together, taking a deep breath, as our noses brushed together lightly. It's strange watching you give up or give in on things that Ye want to have or do because it'd be holding your sister back or would help her or make her happy. I closed my eyes in the face of his words, brows furrowed as I was unsure how to respond. All I could do was bite at my lip anxiously, but he quickly put a stop to it by gently pulling my lip away with his thumb, letting it linger there until I met his gaze again. I much prefer it when you do what you want with that confident attitude and pretty smile on your face, he whispered against my lips, brushing them together once, twice, 3 times, before moving back to pressing our heads together. What are ya gonna do when Edward breaks up with your sister? He asked again, softly this time. I took a deep breath, steeling myself a little as I was going to voice something that I had only vaguely thought of in my head before. I'm going to leave her alone completely. I'm not going to just ignore her if she comes to me and I'll force feed her myself if I see she's not eating like she's supposed to. But I'm not going to hover and be forced to watch her go about her daily routine like a lifeless husk, barely able to recognize that I'm even there. It won't be something I'll be able to help her with. Bella will need to go through it all on her own. Of course, that doesn't mean I'll abandon her, but I also refuse to be her scapegoat if she decides to take her pain out on me. Jasper took a deep breath as he pulled back slightly to lean against the tree, only to let out an equally deep sigh of relief, his sweet, cool breath ruffling my hair a bit as he raised both hands to cup my face. You don't know how glad I am to hear you say that. I thought I'd have my hands full trying to convince Ye that being her emotional stress ball would be a bad idea. He gave a lingering kiss to my temple. I didn't like the idea of you getting hurt so much for your sister when it wouldn't even help her much, and she wouldn't even be in the right state of mind to appreciate it or feel guilty for us, and yeah. Is that all that you were worried about? I teased, play acting as if it was no big deal, Please, with as much as we plan to keep in contact, and as much as you promise to text and call me every day, it'd be a wonder if I could have gotten away with such needless self-sacrificing behavior, even with you gone, I finished slyly, though my smile was no doubt warm with my growing affection for him. What with him continuously proving with his words and actions that he was easily putting me first, and carefully taking my well-being into full consideration. Jasper wasn't the only one that admired single-minded devotion. He gave me a flat look again. I'm sure you would have found a way. I doubt there's much you couldn't do if you put your mind to it, he finished dryly. Of course, that only made me laugh aloud at his confidence in my ability to do what I want, regardless of what anyone said. True, I agreed, seeing no point in arguing the statement. After cementing our plans for the Cullens' inevitable but ultimately very temporary future departure, we moved on to lighter topics. Or at least it started that way. Were children something you ever thought of having in the future? Jasper suddenly asked, surprising me, and he immediately noted when my emotions turned somber, his expression turning more serious. You know I never liked children, not even when I was one myself. They're messy, loud, annoying, expensive, and far, far too fragile and impressionable for me to believe I would do a good job of raising them, I confessed. You'd make a wonderful mother, Jasper refuted. Just look at Bella. From what you've told me, you've mostly had to raise yourself and your sister on your own, and she turned out fine. That's different, but thanks for trying to cheer me up, I said half-heartedly. He didn't answer my question, he prodded gently, rubbing a comforting hand over my arm. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to reveal, something I had never told anyone but Charlie since it happened. Not even Renee or Bella, especially not Bella. While I never really liked kids, and was apprehensive of my ability to take care of one, I still had the secret desire to have and raise a child of my own. I paused then, looking down at my lap, putting a hand to my abdomen, unable to face Jasper as I confessed to my deficiency. I still can't have kids. Jasper was silent after the confession, which only spurred me on to hurriedly elaborate on my statement. The doctor said my womb was inhospitable, I quoted bitterly. That it would be difficult to have children for me. I gave a sharp laugh. They might as well have said it was impossible with the pitying looks they gave me. Maddie, Jasper trailed off, unsure of what to say, how to comfort me. It's fine, I said airily, not giving him a chance to think of something. I had questioned my ability to properly raise a child. My body just gave the answer for me. Obviously, I just wasn't meant to have kids, but that's fine. It's not like I had really planned on having them in the future anyways. I assured, though whether it was to assure myself or Jasper, well, I tried not to think too hard on that. I mean, I already knew I was different, but having a defective body just kind of cemented that for me. I laughed weakly, though it was cut short when I was suddenly breathless because Jasper turned me to straddle his lap and gave me a hard kiss, nearly bruising. Don't you dare call yourself defective, Madeline. You are nothing of the sort. Jasper growled angrily, though his hold on me, his touches, were gentle as he caressed his hands up my body until he was cupping my face, brushing his fingers over my cheeks, as if to wipe away non-existent tears. Shit, there they were, I thought, as his painfully gentle actions caused my eyes to begin tearing up. I bit my lip, punishingly to hold them back, closing my eyes in an attempt to prevent any waterworks. Sobbing was the last thing I needed right now. It'd only make me feel worse in the end. Oh, darling, he whispered against my lips, temples pressed together. How am I supposed to comfort ya? He agonized. And how was he? It's not like he could promise me children even if I wasn't infertile, and normal options like surrogate mothers, artificial insemination, and adoption were no longer on the table because of my chosen partner being an unaging immortal vampire. Besides, I had already cried my tears over this, convinced myself that I no longer wanted children despite the small voice in the back of my head that told me I was deluding myself. I ignored it. There was no point in wanting for something I could never have. I had learned that in my first life, and while it was difficult having the choice taken away from me, choosing not to have them and being unable to were two entirely different things. It was not something impossible to live with. Life was life, and it continued to move on, uncaring of my inner turmoil at being rejected or pitied by those around me, simply because I was unable to have children. It was one of the things I feared most in this life that I wished I didn't. I knew what the outcome would be if I told Renee and Bella. Of course I did. I'd seen it, and fuck if only seeing their reactions to the news didn't hurt. I'd expected no less than what I'd seen. but had been eternally hopeful that I was wrong, only to have those hopes irreparably shattered when I searched the outcome and found them disappointingly living up to my expectations, and therefore, worse fears. Renee, sweet, airheaded Renee, had tried to be supportive in my vision, but disappointment at being deprived of future grandchildren from her eldest daughter was in every line of her strained, smiling face. And Bella, idealistic, naive Bella, would never look at me the same, having the vague notion of a perfect white picket fence family with 2 kids in her head in regards to her future. Her vision self would forever look at me, with pity in her eyes, as if I was no longer whole to her, as if I were sick, as if I was defective. No, just seeing their reactions was enough to leave scars on my soul that would ache and burn whenever I recalled the memory. I wasn't about to cut them deeper by going through it myself firsthand, of feeling all the raw hurt and humiliation I had seen etched in my face in those visions. The echoes were enough to haunt me. But Jasper didn't have expectations of me. How could he ask any more of me than just being with him? In that sense, he was very much like Edward, so very grateful that I could look beyond the fact that he wasn't human, that he gladly accepts anything I'm willing to give, no matter how small, without asking anything more, knowing of the sacrifices I had to make, would make, in order to continue to be with him, not that I myself considered them sacrifices. In that sense, it was why I chose to confess this to him without a fight, without holding back, because maybe this way he wouldn't have to worry about taking away a potential future I could have had with an average human like Edward does with Bella. And this way I could finally come to terms with the fact that I wouldn't have had children regardless of my ability to do so if I was going to end up with Jasper anyways. That in itself was more of a comfort than any of the excuses I made in my efforts to convince myself I didn't want children. With Jasper, there was no need to feel as if I were disappointing anyone, because there was no expectations for me to disappoint. To the Cullens, it was an impossibility, and therefore my infertility was a moot point. There was no need for me to feel as if I were defective if I was with Jasper. He wouldn't be disappointed. He wouldn't pity me. He wouldn't abandon me because of it, like any future human partners I might have had, which was a very real fear that had developed at any future relationships I would have before I'd had that first vision of Jasper and I together. So really, Jasper didn't actually have to do anything to comfort me. He just had... "Just be there for me, Jasper," I whispered, finally opening my eyes to meet his pained gaze. I moved my arms to wrap around Jasper's neck, one hand clinging to his shirt tightly, the other firmly tangled in his hair. Don't abandon me," I whispered a little desperately. For as much as I knew such a thing was impossible with Jasper, I still needed the reassurance, needed it more than I originally thought. "No, never," he swore, sealing his vow with a kiss that showed some of his own desperation at his inability to do more for me. "You've become something far more valuable to me than my own life, than my family's lives." His arm around my waist tightened, his free hand roaming my body before busying itself by unbuttoning my coat. "You have become irreplaceable, someone I can no longer live without." He kissed and nipped down my neck and shoulders as he slid my coat off. "You have become the most important reason for me to continue to exist. You've given me purpose, a drive to live, a desire to be a better person, to be someone worthy of being at your side." My breath hitched at his words as much as because of his actions as he carefully put aside my coat with one hand, the other steadily untying the front of my dress, cool lips nipping and sucking at the sensitive hollow above my collarbone. "Does that frighten you?" Jasper breathed against my skin, his nose skimming up until he was nuzzling the point between my neck and jaw, making me gasp as he slid both hands into my now open front dress to reveal the black lace underwear I wore underneath. Mentally smirking a little when he groaned at the sight, then growled when he spotted the matching black lacy garter I wore on my left thigh. What was his question again? Right. Was I scared or something similar? The answer, of course, was a resounding no. Oh, I knew I probably should be scared. That the intensity of his feelings, his desires of just how important I'd become to him, were something to be terrified of. But I wasn't. And the reason for that was very simple. It was because I felt the exact same way. Before I came to accept Jasper as a prospective partner, I had no intention of involving myself in Bella's story beyond minimizing any damage done because of her and Edward's romantic drama. Once I did come to be with Jasper, I still intended to do next to nothing to change the path I had seen and known would work best in the end for everyone. And then I had really truly fallen for Jasper, rather than just an ambiguous figure I'd seen in my visions, and Bella's problems were no longer my top priority, no longer the basis my choices and decisions revolved around. Jasper had become my point of focus, my most important person, my reason to live rather than simply continuing to exist. Jasper had become my other half, someone that made me whole, that made me feel more alive than I had ever been in either life. He had made my life worth living. No, never. I vowed back to him with as much devotion and sincerity as he had himself, letting my feelings reach him, unrestrained and smiling at his sharp intake of breath that let me know he received them, kissing me with fervor once again as he shared his own emotions with me, overwhelming me and making me gasp for breath, allowing him the opportunity to deepen the kiss. I did nothing to hold back the moans that followed, as our tongues battled for dominance, pressing myself into his hands when they slid under the thin material of my bra, shamelessly crying out and biting his lip when he rolled and pinched a pert nipple between skilled fingers. The bestial growl that followed my reaction did nothing but further inflame my building lust. Jasper, my voice was breathy and pleading as I ground my hips down roughly against his own in an attempt to lessen the pulsing heat of my core. It didn't work, but gods did it. Feel good. Jasper encouraged my actions with a pleased rumble from his chest, one hand slipping from its haven between my breasts and bra to firmly grope at my half-exposed ass. Thanks to my risque panties, rocking his hips up and encouragingly pushing my hips down to create a delicious friction that made it impossible for me to keep quiet. My hands gripped at his jacket and tore it off his shoulders until I couldn't pull it off any longer. But Jasper was quick to appease me as he shifted us so he was looming over me and finished the job himself as he leaned down to kiss me, carelessly tossing the no-doubt designer jacket aside before moving his hands back to my exposed body faster than I could keep up with. My breath hitched and my desire went up another impossible notch when he gracefully divested himself of his shirt to reveal his lean, fit, scar-riddled arms and torso to me, undoing his belt and zipper with one hand while the other tugged down at my now uncomfortably damp panties. "Are you sure about this, Jasper?" I asked, even as I lifted my hips so he could slide them off with little effort, carefully leaving on the lacy garter, I noticed. "I should really be the one asking you that," Jasper replied with a low, throaty chuckle that had me visibly shiver and further widened Jasper's pupils, erasing more of the darkened amber his eyes had become. "I haven't forgotten any moment I've spent touching ya, learning what ya don't like being touched. Learning what ya do," I gasped when he snuck his hand beneath me and slid his skilled fingers purposefully over my lower back, making it arch and my spine tingle. "Learning how gentle I'm supposed to handle ya. Or how rough," he growled when I cried out as his other hand roughly tugged and pinched a pert nipple. "So, that means?" I shamelessly mewed when I felt his dick slide over my wet core, teasingly rubbing lightly against my swollen, sensitive clit. "That means," Jasper purred as he lowered his lips to my ear, pressing a bit more firmly against me as I ran my hands eagerly up and down his scarred, cool back, "that I'm ready to learn how to drive you wild with this," I moaned when he emphasized his words with a sharp thrust. My hips, unable to reciprocate the action with the firm grip one hand had taken on one hip, his other lovingly roaming the contours of my body, from the back of my knee to ghosting over my arms with his fingertips. "Do you want me to, Maddie? Do you want me to drive you wild?" he whispered seductively before nibbling and suckling on my earlobe. "Gods, yes," I pleaded when he totally cheated by projecting his own feelings of love and desire on me, which only had my own lust grow a bit frenzied. Honestly, it's not like I needed any encouragement. Any further thoughts were halted when the head of his cock pressed against my pulsing nether lips, impatient but unable to move my lower half. I was forced to squeeze my eyes shut and bite my lip to hold in a whimper of need. "Look at me, Maddie," he whispered, voice low and smoky. I shuddered in a breath as I managed to pry my eyes open at his request, only for it to catch in my throat at the intensity I found in his darkening amber eyes, his emotions washing over me in the same moment he finally entered me completely in one quick thrust. My breath left me in one throaty cry, unsure if it came from the physical pleasure of having Jasper inside me or from the overwhelming sensation of feeling him completely. It felt like the world had stopped as Jasper slowly, painstakingly rocked into me, so agonizingly careful, so achingly gentle. In return for his ironclad physical control, he allowed me to feel his everything, I felt his desire, his lust, his affection, his fear, his determination. I even felt the burning sensation that could only be his thirst, but the strongest of his emotions that I could feel was his love. And gods did I know how cheesy that sounded. It didn't even do his feelings justice, nor mine for that matter. I hated to admit it, but Edward may have been right about his feelings for Bella being stronger than hers for him. Not because Bella didn't love him to her full capacity, but because the intensity and potency of a vampire's emotions are simply on a completely different level than that of a human's. They felt more deeply, more intensely. They simply felt more. Humans simply aren't capable of such a complex level of emotion. It's too much, too overwhelming to feel all at once in just one moment. I felt like my whole self was being warmed and blanketed and changed, my own feelings struggling to match his own intensity desperately, wanting to love him as much as he did me, unable to bear the thought that my feelings couldn't match his own. I was brought back to the present when Jasper brushed away the tears that had spilled over without my realizing, kissing my wet cheeks with the same aching care he treated my body with. I let my thoughts drift and let my mind enter a pleasant haze, focusing on my hands roaming his scarred body, memorizing every pattern and texture, watching his passionate, focused expression through half-lidded eyes, his furrowed brows, perfect nose slightly scrunched, moist lips slightly parted and jaw clamped tightly. My heart stuttered at every one of the hisses of pleasure he let escape through clenched teeth, every flare of his nostrils and rise of his chest as it indicated him completely breathing in the scent of our act, every huff of exertion, every pained groan of half-sated desire. This was torture to us both, I knew, but gods, was it amazing torture. Faster, I pleaded softly, hesitantly, not wishing to push him beyond his limits. He responded with a growling moan, dropping his head into the nape of my neck. Yes, he hissed into my skin, nipping and licking at it gently in stark contrast to how I registered the hands he placed by my head, tearing through the cover and earth beneath us like wet paper. Yeah, that didn't help any as his tempo sped up quite a bit, leaving me even more lost than before. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered how I was keeping any pretense of lucidity at this point, as my cries escalated in volume and I clawed weakly at his back, ankles hooked around his wonderfully thrusting hips. Yes, fuck, Jasper, please, I cried as I felt myself unable to hold back my peak anymore. Mystified as to how I even lasted this long. How long has it been? Jasper pressed a hard, toe-curling kiss to my lips as he released a bit more of his control, now going faster than I knew any human was capable of at this point, but still only bringing me mind-numbing pleasure as he growled by my ear, crumbling bark and tearing fabric, already white noise at this point. Come with me, Maddie, he breathed passionately, and I screamed it as Jasper let out his own guttural shout, cut off when he bit into his own arm to stifle it, and perhaps curtail his instinct to bite me in his own peak. I panted and lay boneless, shuddering weakly as I felt his burning, cold seed fill me completely. Jasper didn't release his arm until we had both calmed slightly from the intensity of our shared climax. I barely even registered when I had been redressed, and the two of us were now snuggling, mostly fully clothed, under some still intact blankets. I hummed, pleased and sated, and lazily brought my hand up to run through Jasper's flawless, sex-teaseled hair as he rested his head against my still racing heartbeat. That was torture, he murmured, voice slightly muffled by the clothes. I only laughed breathlessly, unable to muster more than that at the moment. I was actually thinking along the same lines, lover, I purred in amusement, teasing. Jasper only raised himself to press our temples together, brushing his lips lovingly over mine. I look forward to doing it again, he purred back, pupils dilating at the thought and rugged smirk curling his lips. I only laughed again and peppered kisses on his face, wrapping my arms around his vibrating shoulders, feeling his own laughter before I heard it. I wasn't entirely surprised when I discovered that Jasper had claimed the whole basement for himself, his own man cave rather than a single room in the upper floors. I spent my time taking everything in, fascinated by what filled the room. Seeing as they had no need to sleep and most were nomadic, having a room they can personalize can really tell a person a lot about the one who did it, and I greedily looked my fill. The roomy main area was lined wall-to-wall with bookshelves that reached floor to ceiling, only broken by a fireplace. a large flat-screen TV, and shelves or hanging decorations of what could only be very valuable-looking historical artifacts. Standing lamps, side tables with more antique objects, gorgeous rugs, and plenty of comfortable-looking, chic, modern couches and chairs filled the room just enough to feel inviting without feeling overcrowded at all. I skimmed over the book titles in awe as Jasper silently guided me around, occasionally speaking to describe a piece on the wall or on a table, and explaining his organizing system, taking in my reaction with a warm, dizzying smile as he slowly herded me to the unexplored rooms, allowing me to take it all in. There had always been the assumption in the Twilight fandom that Jasper was interested in American history and war. Granted, it was a fair, if obvious, assumption to make considering his background. But that was only one facet of his true interest. It wasn't only American history books that lined his shelves, it was world history. Their wars, their art, their religions, military, political, philosophical treatises, even classic literature from around the world. Children's books included. When I say Jasper is interested in history, I would mean every possible facet that makes up history around the world. This wasn't something flat, something shallow and one-dimensional. This was a true passion of his. Jasper really was a scholar in the truest sense of the word. The book just hadn't done that aspect of him justice. It only really hit me how well it fit him when he guided me through the arched, open doorway leading to a slightly smaller room. It was a study, the first thing I realized as I spotted the antique desk. Then the bookshelves caught my attention and my eyes widened when I saw that they weren't store-bought texts. All of the books in this room looked handcrafted, from their bindings to the words inside them, and it wasn't just Jasper's handwriting. I recognized the rest of the Cullens' handwriting as well. Journals, studies, theorems, autobiographies, historical accounts, treatises, all of it neatly organized and meticulously cared for in this room. I couldn't do anything but stare at it all, eyes roaming slowly over every shelf, only for my breath to catch and get stuck in my throat when I saw the shelf closest to the door. Their most recent works, Madeline Hannah Swan. My name was embossed on a lot of Jasper's recent books, whether it was my full name or just my nickname. Some even just had terms of endearment, but there was no mistaking just who it was about. My hands shook as I reached up to brush the spines of the high-quality leather-bound masterpieces, almost too afraid to touch them at all. I shut my eyes gratefully, leaning back into Jasper, when I felt him step just behind me. Overwhelmed, hand gripping the dark, polished shelf tightly, he wrapped a supporting arm around my waist, the other coming up to cover the hand that held the shelf in a death grip. "I didn't write about you at first," he whispered, brushing his thumb over my knuckles, the hand at my hip rubbing small, soothing circles. "I was rather confused and wary when I felt you for the first time. That day, I had been struggling with my thirst, like always," he ended a bit bitterly. "It was one of the longest times I'd gone without feeding. The air vents had just blown the scent of a girl walking by in our direction. I let my thoughts wander," he confessed, near inaudible voice full of shame and resignation, sounding far, far too tired for my tastes. Worry, panic, concern all flared inside me as I moved to grip the arm around me with both hands, as if I could keep it there forever. I relaxed slightly, not having realized I had even tensed. When Jasper melded into me, taking a deep breath as he nuzzled his nose in my hair, his own stiff posture melting into a more relaxed state. Edward looked ready to drag me out by my hair. He smiled into my neck. Small though it might have been. "But then your sister finally caught his attention," he finished softly. "It's something we always do whenever we move or someone else moves in on our territory without realizing. Edward reads their thoughts, and I measure just what it is our new neighbors feel for us. We're always checking to make sure it's safe for us to stay as long as we can in one place." He paused, then seeming to gather his thoughts. I let him, remaining silent as he wordlessly led me to yet another room. This one, the smallest room yet, but by no means small on its own. Nothing decorated the center of the room save for a gorgeous circular rug and an antique chandelier. The walls, however, were lined with bookshelves and chairs, and one corner of the room was largely occupied by the comfiest-looking book nook I'd ever seen. I happily followed Jasper to the little slice of paradise, smiling as he lifted me and placed me in the large nest of pillows and soft blankets, curling us up together in the corner. "And so your sister got Edward's attention and you got mine. I didn't understand at the time just why he was so frustrated, and looking at you too, more Bella than you. That's when I focused on your emotions and I felt it. Yaks like us cared about us, were worried for us. For me, I could feel it. I knew you were trying to hide it. But I dug a little deeper, confused on why you felt like you did, and I was stunned by the depth, the intensity of what you felt. For me, he repeated in amazement. I couldn't mistake it for lust or awe or a shallow crush. It felt like something close to what goes on between Emmett and Rosia or Carlisle and Esme. Maybe not as strong, but the parallel blew me away, and I couldn't understand how Yo could feel it to a total stranger, at least not until Edward told us about your gift. I knew it, I muttered under my breath to lighten the mood, managing a small smile and his thumb brushing over the back of my hand. He had been mad that you could intentionally block him out or focus on what he didn't care to hear. So he intentionally tried to look deeper into your thoughts, he said, almost apologetically, as I hissed at that. Having already felt attached to you, without realizing it, because of what Yak had felt for me. I got mad and defended Ya, but Edward basically let slip that he had seen a few visions of us, together, when you were distracted, and that of course I would take your side despite not even having really met you yet. I snickered at that, Jasper smirking at the memory of Edward's apparent frustration at the time. Poor Edward, I drawled in mock sympathy, Jasper smirking at my sarcasm before it melted to a soft smile as he continued talking. He wasn't entirely wrong, though. Even before I knew about our apparent future together, I couldn't help but be drawn to you, your emotions. I wondered how much you really knew about us, and if you knew everything, how you could still have such feelings for us, for me, he whispered. Do you know the answer now? I asked softly in return, nuzzling my face in the crook of his neck. Yes and no, Jasper replied, an amused smile on his lips. Being in love with you, knowing the love I have for my family, I can understand why yaks treat us the way ya do, why you choose to be close to us, but how you came to love us in the first place is as much a mystery to me as it was from the beginning. I scoffed at that, rolling my eyes at him. That's not much of a mystery, Jazz. You're good people, of course I care about you. What you are isn't nearly as important as who you are, I stated clearly. Well, at least to me, I shrugged, only just noticing Jasper giving me a warm, odd smile. What? I smiled back, unable to help myself. Every day I find out another incredible thing about you and wonder just how on earth I got lucky enough to be the one you love, he murmured, hugging me closely and burying his nose in my hair. As if I would choose anyone else, I retorted haughtily, smiling as I snuggled closer to him. He's a bit irritated that we're about to interrupt their alone time together, Jasper commented as he led us to Edward's room. Geez, what a baby, I muttered. And shouldn't he be focused on Bella right now instead of us? Jasper just chuckled. I shrugged and knocked lightly on the door he motioned at. Yo, mind if we interrupt for a bit? I asked lightly, not waiting for a response, as I opened the door to see Edward shifting Bella into his lap. Go ahead, Edward chuckled, freaking me out a little at his friendliness as I scooched closer to Jasper in the doorway, but I smirked at their new closeness. It sounded like you were having Bell for lunch, so we came to see if you would share. I grinned, holding my hands out and wriggling my fingers expectantly. Bella only scowled at that, cheeks burning at the nickname and teasing while Edward actually grinned. Sorry, I don't believe I have enough to spare, he replied, his arms pulling her in more closely to him. Actually, Jasper said, smiling as he stepped forward and pulling my reluctant self with him. Maddie thinks there's going to be a storm tonight, so Emmett wants to play ball. Are you game? As much as I teased Bella about their relationship, I wasn't entirely comfortable seeing them settle into it. Not because she was my sister, but because I felt moments snuggling with your partner were a more private thing. I'd no doubt be as uncomfortable as Bella seemed to be if someone walked in on Jazz and I's snuggle time. Though I'd hide it way better, preferably behind a wall of shamelessness and merciless teasing that would make the intruder uncomfortable enough to leave and strive to never do so again. I smirked both at my thoughts and the questioning gaze Bella sent me, silently asking why they were talking about playing sports when a storm is coming. My family already knew that I had a knack for guessing the weather better than a news forecast, saying I had strong animal instincts teasingly whenever I guessed the weather and turned out right. Edward's eyes lit up, but he hesitated. Of course you should bring Bella, I drawled, getting an amused glance from Jasper. I won't be the only one to suffer through sitting on the sidelines if I can help it. Do you want to go? Edward asked her, excited. His expression vivid. It honestly disturbed me a little to see him so happy when I was already fairly used to him being a constant Debbie Downer. Sure, my poor sister replied, unable to disappoint that face. Where are we going? I coughed into my hand to hide a laugh, drawing the parallel to the Lord of the Rings movie where one of the hobbits said much the same thing. Volunteering yourself for walking straight into Mordor, I snickered under my breath. Bella only gave me one of her ineffectual looks while Edward ignored me, as per usual. That was fine. Jasper's low chuckles were encouragement enough that I was funny and that Ed and Bell were just sticks in the mud. We have to wait for Thunder to play ball, you'll see why, Edward promised her, securing Bella's attendance, if only because of her curiosity now. Will I need an umbrella? She asked me, though the teasing lilt in her voice made me laugh a little, if only to brush off her skepticism at my weather predicting and the familiar small sting of guilt I felt for keeping my abilities a secret from her. Will she? Jasper asked next, his teasing tone meant in a far more nice-spirited manner, wordlessly supporting me and keeping my thoughts from spiraling into the depressing reasons as to why telling Bella was a bad idea. Of course I had considered telling Bella about my abilities way before moving to Forks was even a concept in Bella's mind, and, of course, like all big decisions, I used my gift to see the potential outcomes. They weren't pretty. I smiled softly when Jasper nudged me back into the present, giving a warning glance at Edward, who looked like he wanted to comment on my thoughts. No, I replied lightly, betraying none of my thoughts. The storm's more likely to hit over town. It should be dry enough in the clearing they use. Good then, Jasper allowed the enthusiasm to leak into his voice and into the room, easing Bella's fear. Let's make sure Carlisle is still on board, huh? I said, skipping playfully backwards until I was outside Edward's room. As if he would change his mind, Jasper smirked as he turned to follow, letting it drop as soon as his back was to them. Brow furrowed slightly in concern as he inconspicuously closed the door behind him. Darlin', were you thinking about? He started in a low voice, wrapping me protectively in his arms. About the reactions Bella gave in my visions. I finished for him in the same light tone as before, only to wince as I hadn't wanted to use that falsity with Jasper, but at this point I was used to hiding hurts caused by my family that hadn't really happened behind levity and a false cheerfulness. I softly rested my hand over his heart in silent apology, voice becoming no more than a whisper as I answered. Yes. Jasper placed his hand over mine on his chest for a moment before raising it to his lips to press a gentle kiss in the center of my palm that pulled a giggle from me, the skin there being ticklish. Let's get you home for a change of clothes, preferably before it starts to rain, Jasper murmured, smirking at his success in distracting me and lifting my mood. I hummed, not bothering to eye my current attire. I already knew the dress and shoes I wore wouldn't cut it. I just pecked Jasper on the lips and smirked back. Then let's get going while Sam and Frodo are still busy. Canoodling. Jasper just chuckled lightly as we made our way out of his home. Extra little vignette. Telling Charlie, Chief Swan came home fairly tired from another long, tedious day of work. Don't get him wrong, he liked his job well enough, and generally being chief of police to such a small town, rarely had anything worse than another teenager crashing a car or running over local wildlife in their carelessness. But the week had been one of the rare busy times, all stemming from some idiot boys who thought it'd be fun to race from Forks to Port Angeles and cause a huge accident. It was a miracle that no one had died, only a few needing to have an extended stay in the ER, but expected to make full recoveries. That was all well and good, but settling and sorting through it all was a disaster and a half at their small police branch. The nightmare of red tape and paperwork had Charlie grateful for having his caring daughter Madeline there to make sure he ate home-cooked meals, slept properly, and kept the house from looking like a bachelor pad. Charlie had just flopped himself down on the couch, very ready to turn on the TV and wind down with some sports when he spotted Madeline standing by the stairs. Hey, Maddie. Charlie greeted warmly, able to mask most of his fatigue from his voice, not wanting to spook his daughter away or concern her overly much. It hadn't been long since she had come over to spend the summer, and she had been surprisingly subdued and quiet, despite their shared delight over the recent news that she and her sister would be moving to Forks until they got into college. Knowing Madeline as he did, he decided to wait until his usually confident girl chose to confide in him whatever was wrong with her, choosing himself to treat her as he normally did, if not with a bit more care out of his worry for her. Madeline took a hesitant step forward, stepping out into the living room so she was no longer half hidden in the corner, shoulders hunched, head low, and hands clenched tightly together against her chest. Daddy? The address was soft, little more than a whisper, and sounding so broken and close to tears that Charlie immediately straightened and shoved aside the TV remote in his hand along with any notion of sports watching. "Sweetie, what's wrong?" the man asked worriedly, holding out a hand to beckon his baby girl to his side. Panic and concern swelled quickly in his chest at seeing Maddie shake, eyes becoming glassy and lower lip trembling as she held back tears before launching herself into his arms and breaking down. All Charlie could do at the moment was cradle her protectively into his chest and soothe her until she calmed. Thoughts buzzing with what on earth could have made his strong-willed Madeline cry, he found out with her next hoarse words coming out a broken confession from teeth-worried lips, delivered as if she believed them to be of equal severity as a death sentence. "I can't have kids," she croaked into his shirt, and Charlie had frozen for only a second before his hold on his precious baby girl tightened. "Dad," she sobbed. "I can't have kids," she repeated, as if expecting the repetition to bring about a different reaction, her tone equally terrified and horrified. I can't tell them couldn't," she corrected herself. "I found out a few days before I got here, and they'd treat me differently if they knew. I know them, I know they would, like I'm broken, like I'm sick, like I'm defective." Her feelings were pouring out of her now, fears and thoughts that had been festering since she found out, gushing like pus from an infected wound. The worst part was that Charlie couldn't deny his daughter's words. Oh, for sure, he loved his other daughter and the mother of his children. But that love no longer blinded him to their faults, thanks in large part to Madeline herself, as the two talked and grew closer as a real family. He knew Renee and Bella as well as Madeline, despite not living with them full-time, or even part-time, any longer. He knew when he couldn't do anything to say that the two wouldn't react just like Maddie expected them to without needing to lie, and he wouldn't want to do that regardless. Hating to lie to his daughter and also not wanting her to get hurt by following false reassurances. They both knew her fears were entirely too plausible. Charlie would rather Maddie not go through the rest of her life receiving pity from her own mother and sister. "You are not broken, Madeline. I am not going to see you as anything less than I have before I learned this. Not being able to have kids doesn't make you any less my daughter. It doesn't mean I love you any less, and it doesn't make you any less than who you were before. You'll always be a Swan. You'll always be my baby girl. You'll always just be Madeline to me. Never ever forget that." Charlie kissed the crown of her head as his words got her sobbing again. "It'll be all right, sweetie, you'll see," he murmured, wishing he could hold her there forever, protect her from all the darkness the world held that threatened to swallow her. Holding tight to her slim, shaking frame now only reminded him of the still vivid memories he had of holding her as a newborn. She had been so tiny and fragile-looking, so quiet compared to her sister that he and Renee constantly checked her in her crib, just to assure themselves that she was alive, that she was warm and breathing. He had fallen in love with her and her sister as soon as he held them in his arms and swore in the same moment that he would do anything he could to protect them. Renee had robbed him of the ability to fulfill that promise for most of their lives, but he got his chance with Madeline, who was open to his overtures of deepening family ties. But this, he knew there would be things he couldn't protect her from. The inevitable scars that life left as you grew into yourself and the world. But at least he could be there for her, be a pillar of support where her ditzy mother and self-absorbed sister faltered, be her rock. Charlie could do that, and he would. He'd do anything to see his daughter happy and healthy, even if that meant lying and keeping secrets from his ex-wife and daughter. He loved the two dearly and knew they were good people, but in this he knew they would hurt her far more than they would help her, having hurt her already without even realizing. Yes, Charlie would just have to be enough. No, he would be enough. He had to be. Unknown to Charlie, his support to Maddie was far more than just enough. It was something precious and invaluable that allowed her the strength to recenter herself, and gave her the courage to allow her relationship with Jasper to happen when she learned of it. But Charlie would never learn that, content simply to be there for Maddie when she needed him. "It'll be all right," Charlie repeated with a soft whisper, carting his fingers through her short hair in comfort. "You'll see."